No maps, no backup, no second chances. Out there in the wilderness, the rules were simple: adapt or die. The frontier was unpitying. If a man wanted to survive, he needed the right tools. Tools that kept him breathing when everything else was trying to kill him. He needed weapons for hunting and for defense. He needed fire to keep warm and to keep predators at bay. Every item mattered. One wrong choice, one forgotten piece of gear, and a man could starve, freeze, or end up dead on the wrong side of an ambush. And food wasn't the only enemy here. Native tribes defending their land, disease creeping through a cut, a snapped leg miles from help. Any of it could turn an expedition into a death march. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. Now let's break down the 7 survival tools that meant the difference between life and death on the frontier. Number 1, knives. First and foremost, a frontiersman without a knife was as good as dead. The Norse had a saying, "The knifeless man is a lifeless man." Out there, on the frontier, that was as much as fact as it was wisdom. Mountain men heavily depended on knives for cutting, skinning, gutting, carving, fighting. If a job needed doing, the knife did it. And no two knives were exactly alike. Every man carried what he trusted. Some bought their blades from traders, others hammered them out of old files or horseshoeing rasps. It didn't matter where it came from. What mattered was that it could cut when it had to. The Green River knife was a favorite, a simple, sharp trade knife, perfect for butchering game. Then there was the Bowie knife, long and deadly, a tool and a weapon in one. Some men carried dirks or daggers, slim and double-edged, better suited for stabbing than carving. And then there was necessity. You see, when a man couldn't buy a knife, he made one. A scrap of steel, a wooden handle, a few rivets, that's all it took. Fancy didn't matter. Sharp did. Warren Ferris wrote about how knives were trade, currency, and even survival itself. He recalled an encounter with native traders. They were then permitted to come up and exchange a few skins, moccasins, etc. for knives, vermilion, and tobacco, pilfering the while everything they could lay their hands upon without being discovered. Furthermore, Osborne Russell laid it out plainly as well. A trapper's gear was bare bones, but built for survival. A horse, a few beaver traps, extra moccasins, powder, bullets, and a butcher knife strapped to his belt. Some today believe mountain men all carried Green River knives, made by J. Russell and Company, but that's not the full story. You see, the company didn't start stamping Green River Works on their blades until 1837. By 1840, the rendezvous, or the great trade gatherings of the fur trappers, were done. That left little time for these knives to spread deep into the wilds. And while some trappers may have used them, it's likely most relied on whatever blades they could find, trade, or forge themselves. James Kleiman, an old hand from the 1820s, carried a butcher knife and nearly died over it. He wrote, "One man ran up and snatched my butcher knife and waved it across my breast. I thought this a bravado, so bared my breast for the fated strike, and this perhaps saved my life." Knives were power. A man's blade could be his last line of defense, the difference between standing tall and lying cold in the dirt. Skinning knives, however, were mostly used for survival. These knives had short, wide, curved blades designed to strip a hide clean without tearing it. A good skinner minimized waste, kept the pelt intact, and got the job done fast. Imported from Sheffield, England, and sold by Hudson's Bay traders, these knives were common in the hands of men who lived off the land. By the 1830s, Green River Works was making them too. The phrase, "done up to Green River," became slang for a job well finished, or a deal well struck. And speaking of knives, don't forget to catch the full episode on Bowie knives now, only on our channel. Indeed, a mountain man's knife was a part of him. Carl P. Russell put it best. As was true of guns, there was something very personal and intimate about a mountain man's favorite knife. Nevertheless, steel kept a man alive up close. Lead did it from a distance. Number 2. Firearms. A frontiersman without a firearm was a dead man walking. Just like knives, guns were survival itself. Hunting, defense, trade, everything depended on a reliable weapon and the skill to use it. But as men pushed deeper into the wild, they needed something tougher. Then enter the Hawken rifle. Built in St. Louis by the Hawken brothers, this was the gun of choice for mountain men facing grizzlies and hostile territory. It was shorter, heavier, and packed a .50 or .53 caliber punch. It could drop a buffalo or stop a charging foe in one shot. Once again, power mattered. But power wasn't everything. Sometimes versatility mattered more. Not every shot had to be precise. In that case, the Northwest trade gun, a smoothbore musket, let men fire shot or ball, making it a jack-of-all-trades weapon. Trappers and traders carried them, and so did native warriors. If a man could only own one gun, this was a smart bet. Then there were pistols, big single-shot horse pistols meant for last-resort fights. Smoothbore, heavy and slow to reload, but when a man had nothing else, that one shot could save his life. The 1830s brought change. Percussion caps made firearms more reliable in wet conditions, replacing flintlocks bit by bit. But old habits died hard, and plenty of men stuck to what they knew. A misfire in a storm could mean the difference between life and death, but a gun alone wasn't enough. You needed the gear to keep it firing. A powder horn, often made from bison horn, kept gunpowder dry. A powder measure ensured every load was consistent. Accuracy depended on it. Lead, a ladle, and a bullet mold turned raw metal into ammunition because mountain men didn't buy bullets. They made them. Lastly, a small leather bag kept lead balls handy. For percussion guns, you carried a cap tin holding the tiny charges that made the rifle fire. Lose those, and you might as well be holding a club. So, yes, a mountain man's rifle was his lifeline. It had to be kept clean, kept loaded, and kept ready, because out here, a second chance wasn't guaranteed. However, a rifle alone wouldn't keep you warm at night. This takes us to number 3. Fire. A frontiersman without fire was as good as dead. Fire meant warmth, food, protection. Fire cooked the meat he killed. Fire sent smoke curling into the sky as a warning or a signal. Without fire, he was nothing more than another lost soul waiting to freeze, starve, or fall prey to something bigger and meaner. The go-to method? Flint and steel. A sharp strike of steel against flint sent a shower of sparks onto waiting tinder. The steel, often repurposed from old files, springs, or tools, had to be high carbon, tough enough to throw sparks, but soft enough not to shatter. Flint, hard as a blade and sharp enough to cut, made the perfect partner. If a man couldn't find flint, chert, jasper, or even agate could do the job. What mattered was the spark. But sparks weren't enough. Tinder made the fire real. The best was char cloth. Linen or cotton burned just enough to catch fire from the faintest spark, smoldering slow and hot until the flame took hold. And if a man ran out, he turned to the land. Amadou, the soft, fibrous inside of a fungus, caught fire fast. Dry grasses, cedar bark, or finely shredded plant fibers also worked in a pinch. A frontiersman had to keep it dry, always ready, because when the wind howled and the night came creeping, there wasn't time to search. But fire-making tools had to be protected. A tin, a pouch, something to keep them from the damp. Mountain men carried them in their possibles bag, protected among their other lifelines. Some carried finely worked fire pouches, passed down or traded, decorated with beadwork or brass tacks. Others had chuckmucks, small, ornate tinder boxes designed to keep fire-starting gear safe and dry. A man might own little, but he never risked losing his fire. Few frontiersmen had fire pistons, but those who did understood their power. A sudden burst of compressed air inside a hollow cylinder could ignite a scrap of tinder in an instant. It was a clever trick, working off sheer pressure and heat, but rare. Most men stuck to what they knew. You see, before steel, before iron, men made fire with pyrite and flint, a method as old as time, using stone to spark against stone. And when no metal was to be found, a man had to rely on sweat and skill. The bow drill, the hand drill, wood grinding against wood, friction giving birth to heat, heat to ember, ember to flame. Fire was a test. A man who could make fire in the rain, in the snow, when the wind tore through the trees, that was a man who had lived to see another sunrise. Out here in the wild, that was the only thing that mattered. But since we're talking about frontiersmen's tools, you might be wondering, what did they carry all those tools in? Number 4, pouches and bags. You see, out on the frontier, a man carried his survival on his shoulder. No backpacks, no cargo pockets, just leather and canvas slung across his body, holding everything he needed to stay alive. Every pouch, every strap, every pocket had to earn its place. There was no room for excess, just what was needed to live another day. First off, there was the possibles bag. It is made of tough leather, worn cross-body, and it held everything a frontiersman could possibly need in a pinch. Powder measure, lead balls, patches, flint and steel. His shooting gear had to be ready at all times. It could also hold a sharp knife, spare gun parts, maybe a bit of dried meat for emergencies. This was the mountain man's toolbox, first aid kit, and survival cache all in one. It looked like a purse to outsiders, but don't let that fool you. A man without his possibles bag was half naked in the wild. And if the possibles bag was for everything, the bullet pouch was for one thing: firepower. Bullet pouches were worn tight against the body, usually under the right arm, for it kept ammunition close at hand. When a man needed to reload, he couldn't afford to dig around. This pouch held lead balls, patches, maybe an extra flint. It was quick, simple, and built for speed. In a gunfight or a fast-moving hunt, it could mean the difference between hitting your mark or taking a bullet yourself. Then there was the market wallet, which was as straightforward as it got. Made from canvas or linen, about 43 inches long, with a double-ended opening in the middle. It had no buttons, no buckles, no fancy work, just a fold-over design that kept food and supplies from spilling out. Trappers and traders used it for carrying dried meat, flour, and trade goods. When not in use, it could be slung over a saddle, stuffed into a pack, or even tied to a belt. Men used it to gather tinder, punkwood, or whatever else they found useful on the trail. It may have been a simple design, but in the wild, simple worked best. Now, for longer journeys, a man needed to rely on more than just a possibles bag. That's where the haversack came in. Originally a military design, it was a single strap bag made for easy access on the move. And unlike the market wallet, which was often packed away, the haversack was worn across the body, keeping food and gear within reach. Dried venison, a tin cup, maybe a small kettle. This was the mountain man's mobile pantry. When a man was weeks from civilization, carrying the right supplies meant the difference between eating and starving. And let's not forget the ditty bag. Borrowed from sailors, the ditty bag was the frontiersman's answer to organization. While the possibles bag carried general survival gear, the ditty bag was for the small but vital things: sewing needles, extra flints, fishing line, a little roll of sinew for repairs. Many men stitched their own from tough linen or scrap leather. And when gear broke, and it would break. This bag kept a man from being helpless. And let's not forget, a man's kitchen had to fit in his bag. That meant a tin cup and a salt horn. The tin cup was for water, tea, coffee, whatever was on hand. The salt horn, usually made from an animal horn, kept his most precious seasoning dry. Out here, salt was how you kept meat from spoiling. Add a hunting knife worn on the belt or tucked inside the possibles bag, and you had everything needed to cook, eat, and keep moving. Now a man could live rough, but he had to eat, and for that he needed the right tools. This takes us to number 5, cooking tools. At the heart of every campfire meal was the cast iron Dutch oven. Heavy? Yes, absolutely. It could bake, boil, stew, and fry. One pot, endless meals. Slap it straight onto the coals. Pile embers on the lid and let the heat do the work. Biscuits, stews, bread, you name it. For baking in the open, they used a reflector oven, a tin contraption that caught and redirected heat from the flames. Lightweight and foldable, it made camp bread, pies, and biscuits possible without a fancy hearth. Then there was the spider skillet, a cast iron pan with 3 strong legs. Instead of balancing a pan on shifting logs, this thing planted itself right in the coals. It was hot, stable, and perfect for frying up meat or flipping corn cakes. For eating on the go, frontiersmen had porringers, small, handled bowls made of wood, pewter, or clay. Now these were part of the cook set, good for cooking up mush, soup, or whatever scraps they had left. And when meat was scarce, toasting forks helped stretch the rations. These long-handled tools let them crisp up stale bread or roast small chunks of meat over an open flame without burning their fingers. Some frontiersmen carried wooden whisks. These were simple tools for mixing up batter or thickening soups. They may not have been glamorous, they were surely useful. Overall, a man could last days without food, but without water, not a chance. This brings us to number 6, water containers. Water meant life. A frontiersman who ran dry was a dead man walking. Rivers and creeks weren't always nearby, and even when they were, the water could kill as fast as thirst. A man needed a way to carry it, something tough, reliable, and built for the hard miles ahead. The first and simplest? Water skins? It's basically a pouch of tanned hide, stitched tight and sealed with pitch or wax. Goat or sheep hide worked best. It was flexible, tough, and able to keep water cool. But there was a catch. It made the water taste like wet leather. Some men got used to it, others held their noses and drank. Wooden canteens came next. These were carved from hardwood and bound like tiny barrels. Oak, maple, whatever was on hand. They were solid, reliable, and kept water from sloshing too much on the trail. But if the seams dried out, they'd leak like a cracked dam. A smart man kept his full. Nature, however, had its own solution. Gourds, hollowed, dried, and sometimes wrapped in rawhide for extra strength. These were also light, easy to carry, and surprisingly good at keeping water fresh. Some were fitted with wooden necks and cork stoppers to keep dirt and bugs out. But drop one on a rock and you'd be drinking dust. In time, however, metal changed the game. By the mid-1800s, tin canteens were everywhere, light, durable, and easy to mass produce. Soldiers carried them by the thousands during the Civil War. Most were wrapped in cloth to keep the metal from heating up in the sun. They were a big step forward, but not perfect. Tin rusted. A careless man might find his water tasting like iron. Now carrying water was one thing, finding clean water was another. Springs were best, but rivers and lakes? A gamble? Some men boiled their water when they had time. Many didn't. Dysentery and cholera cut down as many men as bullets did. A careless drink from the wrong stream could put a man in the ground, and for bigger groups or long hauls, there were barrel canteens, small, reinforced water kegs built to ride in wagons or on pack animals. They held more but were heavier, best suited for those who traveled in numbers. Interestingly, native tribes had their own ways. Some wove baskets sealed with pine resin, others used hollowed-out animal bladders or birch bark containers. Many frontiersmen learned from them, picking up tricks that kept them alive when their own supplies failed. But by the late 1800s, it didn't matter what his water container was made of. It only mattered that it worked. Now, what else did a frontiersman need to make it out alive? Number 7, miscellaneous gear, the small stuff that kept men alive. Like we always say, a frontiersman's life hung on the tools he carried. The big ones, rifles, knives, fire starters, got all the attention in this episode. But it was the smaller, often overlooked gear that made the difference between scraping by and succeeding in the wild. Other than the previously mentioned knives, a man without a proper blade was a man in trouble. Whether it was a tomahawk, hatchet, or full-sized axe, every mountain man carried something sharp and battle-worthy. These tools split wood for fires, carved shelters, and cracked open bones for marrow. And in a fight, they could end a man just as fast as a bullet. Tomahawks were light, easy to carry, and deadly in a pinch. Axes, on the other hand, were heavier but could fell trees. Some carried both. No one traveled without one. And if you want to learn more, check out our recent episode on survival tips, where we take a deeper dive into tomahawks and their many uses. Now, a dull blade was useless. That's why a simple metal file was worth its weight in gold. Knives, axes, even gun parts, it all needed sharpening. Trade records show files were in high demand, proof that frontiersmen relied on them. Those with pack horses usually had one strapped to their gear. Foot travelers, however, had to make do with a whetstone, but sooner or later, a real file was needed. Now, a silk scarf might not seem like survival gear, but it was. Worn around the neck, it blocked the sun and wind. Tied around the mouth, it kept out dust. Used as a bandage, it could stop bleeding. Wet and wrapped around the head, it cooled a man down in the blistering heat. In a pinch, it could even be a sling or a makeshift bag. It was simple, light, and endlessly useful. Also, spare fabric had its many uses. Red flannel, a favorite, worked as insulation, a blanket, a bandage, or even trading stock. And in freezing temperatures, layering it under a coat added precious warmth. A smart man always had some stashed away. Now, wool kept men alive. Hudson Bay blankets, on the other hand, were thick and warm, and they were some of the best a frontiersman could rely on. They held heat even when wet, making them essential in the brutal winters. The point system stitched into the fabric showed size and weight, important details when picking the right one for the journey. Many traded furs for these blankets, knowing they could mean the difference between waking up cold and not waking up at all. And although canvas was tough, waterproof, and adaptable, it found its use as ground cover, a tarp, a shelter, or even a makeshift pack.